My family always enjoyed tagging along on my father's work trips, a mini vacation of sorts. A nice Airbnb, a chance to get away. But I wish I never found that Ouija board. I can still remember my brother's fingers leaving the planchette as if in slow motion. My dad left for a meeting and my mom ran into town to get some groceries for the week. This Airbnb was beautiful, a massive Victorian-style house on the lake with modern white interior finishes. I started to explore the house and discovered a cupboard filled with board games. At the bottom of the stack, I saw it. A black box with Ouija spelled out in thick white font. I slid it out and ran into the living room, yelling for my brother to come downstairs. Out of character for him, he didn't put up much of a fight and sat down across from me. We had both seen enough movies featuring these things, so ignoring the instructions, we placed our fingers on the planchette and I asked the first question. "Is anyone here with us?" Nothing. Then my brother asked a question. "Is this house haunted?" "What a dumb question," I jabbed. He rolled his eyes and looked at the board, trying to think of something else to ask it. I couldn't help myself. I subtly started moving the planchette faster and faster until finally landing on yes. My brother clearly wasn't having it. He looked at me and said, "You're obviously doing that, idiot. This is dumb. I have an assignment to finish." His fingers lifted off the planchette and he walked upstairs. The rest of the trip was fairly boring. My brother started to get sick, so he spent most of it in bed. I kept busy exploring the massive property, catching frogs and swimming in the lake. Looking back, when we returned home, something was off. I was used to feeling the familiarity and relaxation of finally being at my own house, but this time I didn't feel that. Somehow it felt cold and empty, void of any comfort. I remember how quiet it was, how I could hear the ticking of the clock in the kitchen. I got home from school the next day and found my brother in the kitchen, standing over a pot of soup. He was still sick, but there was something else. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. And when he spoke, he was asking questions that he should already know the answers to. He asked, "How was work?" This caught me off guard. I was in the 10th grade, and he obviously knew this. I figured he was feeling a bit better and was just joking around with me. But the way he stood there, his body language, his tone of voice, the look on his face, it was like he was trying to figure out how to act. It didn't feel right. I went upstairs into my room to finish an assignment that was due the next day, but only 30 minutes later, the smoke alarm went off. It startled the crap out of me, and I ran downstairs. Smoke filled the kitchen. My brother's soup was still on the stove. It had boiled over and was hitting the element. It was a mess of thick, burnt sludge. I turned off the stove and ran up to my brother's room, ready to burst through the door and give him a piece of my mind. But before I could, I stopped. I could hear something in his room that wasn't normal. He was talking, but kind of murmuring. I put my ear against the door to listen closer. He sounded concerned, like he was having a serious conversation with someone. In a quiet voice, he was repeating, "Not yet. It's too soon. We're not ready. They'll all know." Confused, I opened the door and looked inside. There he was, standing in the middle of his room, back away from me, hunched over, repeating the same words. Caught off guard, I just said, "You didn't turn the stove off. Your soup is burnt." Without moving his body, he turned his head and looked at me. I don't know how to describe this, but his eyes were blank. His pupils were tiny, and he had the most eerie grin stretched across his face. Honestly, it almost didn't look like my brother. It felt like all the blood left my body. I felt like I was vibrating. My brain couldn't process the uncanny look he gave me. Speechless, I slowly closed the door as he continued to stare, his eyes never leaving mine. His grin getting wider, as if he was amused with my look of shock. My brother's behavior had gotten so strange, I was paranoid about what he might do next. I just crossed my fingers he'd be in his bedroom so I didn't have to see him. I creeped slowly down the hall, hair standing up on the back of my neck and chills running down my spine. But as I passed my brother's room, I heard whispers again. "Alex, come here. Come see. Come here." I froze. How did he even hear me? I slowly opened the door, dreading the sight that was on the other side of it. A stench hit me immediately, like a rotten smell, but not like garbage or rotting vegetables. Something much stronger. I peered in, and there he was, in the same spot as the day before. His back was to me this time, and he was clearly holding something in his hands, looking down at it. I walked up behind him as he continued to whisper the same thing. When I looked down to see what he was holding, my blood ran cold. It was a picture of me, sleeping in my bed. He tilted his head slowly to look at me. That long, thin smile stretched across his face as his whispers turned into quiet, giddy giggles. It was as if he was excited and showing me a secret. As if he expected me to find it funny or be amused. I managed to fake a small laugh in an attempt to play along. Slowly, I started walking back towards his door. His head continued to turn as he watched me. The same uncanny smile on his face and his empty, beady eyes locked on mine. I closed the door and heard in a lower, almost frustrated whisper, "Not yet, we're not ready." With every day that passed, the house felt darker. I dreaded coming home from school more and more. I was walking on eggshells, afraid of what I was going to discover. I couldn't focus on school, my grades fell. Teachers started calling my parents and telling them I was failing classes. I started locking my bedroom door. One night, I woke up to the faintest tapping sound coming from the other side of it. I listened closely, trying to figure out what could have been making that noise. Nervous, I got out of bed, unlocked my door, and creaked it open ever so slightly. To my horror, my brother's eyes and grin filled the crack as his long, overgrown fingernail that had been tapping on my door stopped. Frozen in fear, I stood there, unable to speak. His hair was wet, as if he'd been sweating. His skin was pale. Then he whispered, "We're almost ready." He raised his finger to his lips, motioning to be quiet, as a sinister look of excitement washed over him. Every day, when my parents got home, I'd explain to them what my brother had done, how he was acting. But when they checked on him, he'd be in bed, sick, replying with short answers when they'd ask him something. My parents' frustration grew by the day, but not with my brother, with me. One Saturday, I woke up to my mother yelling in the kitchen, "Oh, for God's sake, where's my knife?" Seconds later, my bedroom door swung open. My mom had the kitchen knife block in her hands. The chef knife, or the butcher's knife. The big one was missing. "Where the hell is my knife?" she said. "Here's the thing. My mom is a head chef at one of the restaurants in my city. In our house, everyone knows to never touch this particular knife set. It was unbelievably expensive, and she kept it pristine. I was at my wit's end. I fired back at my mother. "I didn't touch your stupid knife." I never spoke to her like this. Taken aback, she just said, "We're going to have a talk," and shut my door. The next day when I got off the bus, both of my parents' cars were in the driveway. This was weird because normally they didn't get home from work until at least 6 p.m. I walked in the door to my mom and dad sitting at the kitchen table. They immediately looked at me and told me to sit down. My mind was racing. What could this be about? Was it Michael? Did he do something? Did they find him with the knife? But when I sat down, the conversation was not at all what I was expecting. My mom said, "Your grades have been slipping. You've been different, lashing out at us, and we're worried about you. Your brother is sick, and the way you've been acting isn't helping that either. You're going to spend a month at a study camp to get caught up on your schoolwork and decompress. We've already talked to your teachers." I'll admit, I completely lost it. But the more I argue, the more crazy I looked. How could they not see what was really going on? I sat in the back seat of the car as we pulled out of the driveway. My gaze wandered up to Michael's bedroom window. There he was. He had that thin, empty smile, almost like he expected me to be amused, still, as if it was all a big game. But before he was just out of view, he raised his hand, showing me my mom's knife. I could see him giggling, the same kind of giggle he had when he showed me the picture of me sleeping. I'll be honest, the next couple of days at the camp weren't awful. Getting out of that house was a relief. Being away from my brother was a relief. One night, while doing homework, I got a text from my mom. "We miss you, honey. Please study hard and come back feeling better." Below was a picture of my mom, dad, and Michael waving. I felt comfort, but that changed when I took a closer look at Michael. There he was, with the same smile, the same beady eyes. He was taunting me. Then, a text from Mike. "Can't wait to see you. We're finally ready." Hey everyone, we had a massive jump in views with the last video, so I wanted to say thank you. And a really special thank you to those who left those supportive comments. I really appreciate it. If you want to check out that video, I'll leave it here in the end screen. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.